The night the cold truly arrives, it never announces itself. There is no warning bell, no dramatic shift in the sky. One evening, your flower pots sit quietly as they always have. The next morning, the air feels sharper, thinner, as if winter has slipped a hand around the garden and whispered, "I'm here now." Most people don't notice the danger at first. The pots look the same. The soil looks the same. But beneath the surface, everything has changed. This is where the story really begins. Years ago, I watched an elderly woman on my street step onto her porch before sunrise, wrapped in a wool sweater that had clearly seen many winters. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She simply knelt, pressed her hand against the side of a clay pot, and smiled softly. The way you smile when you understand something others don't yet see. Winter doesn't kill plants, she once told me. Winter tests them. And flower pots are tested first. Unlike plants rooted in the ground, potted flowers live exposed lives. Their roots don't have the steady insulation of earth beneath them. They sit above the soil line, lifted into the wind, the rain, the freeze and thaw cycle that quietly does its damage over weeks, not days. Many gardeners lose plants every winter without ever knowing why. They blame the cold. They blame bad luck. But the truth is more tender than that. Caring for flower pots in winter isn't about doing more. It's about doing less, more wisely. The first and most important thing you can do begins before the first hard freeze ever touches the soil. You move the pots, not dramatically, not far, just thoughtfully. A pot left in the open is like a house with no walls. Wind pulls heat from the soil faster than cold ever could. One sunny afternoon warms the pot just enough to wake the roots, and then night drops suddenly below freezing. That repeated shock, warm, cold, is what cracks roots and drains a plant's strength. A steady cold is survivable. Chaos is not. Slide your pots closer to the house. Nestle them beside brick or stone where the day's warmth lingers into evening. Tuck them out of direct wind, away from corners where air funnels and accelerates. Group them together, letting them share what little warmth they can, the way people naturally huddle when winter deepens. This small act of shelter often saves more plants than any covering ever will. Then comes the second lesson winter teaches, and it surprises many gardeners the first time they learn it. Roots fear wet far more than they fear cold. In winter, plants drink very little. Their growth slows. Their need for moisture nearly pauses. But rain still falls. Snow still melts. Water still sinks into the potting soil. And if it cannot escape, it becomes dangerous. Wet soil freezes harder than dry soil. When it freezes, it expands, pressing against roots that can no longer breathe. When it thaws, rot sets in quietly, invisibly. By the time spring arrives, the plant looks intact above the surface, but its foundation has already failed. That is why drainage becomes sacred in winter. Every pot must have a clear, open drainage hole. No exceptions. Elevate pots slightly on feet, bricks or small blocks, so water can drain freely instead of pooling underneath and refreezing. Never let winter pots sit flat on concrete or bare ground where meltwater can trap cold against the base like a clenched fist. If water cannot escape, cold will always win. The third winter truth comes softly, like a blanket placed over tired shoulders. Mulch is not meant to warm the soil. Mulch is meant to slow change. In winter, sudden change is the enemy. Mulch acts as a buffer, keeping soil temperatures from rising too fast on bright days and dropping too sharply at night. It gives roots time to rest instead of react. Use mulch generously but gently. Straw, shredded leaves, pine needles, or bark chips all work beautifully. Lay it thick over the soil surface, but never press it tightly against stems. Roots like insulation. Stems need air. Think comfort, not confinement. And then, perhaps the hardest lesson for many gardeners, you let go. You stop watering on a schedule. You stop checking every day. In winter, attention must be quieter. Water only when the soil is dry several inches down and temperatures are safely above freezing. When you do water, do it slowly and let excess drain completely before nightfall. Most winter losses come not from neglect, but from kindness given too often. As the season deepens, the garden grows silent. Pots sit still. Leaves dull. Growth disappears from view. But below the surface, something important is happening. Roots rest. Energy stores rebuild. Life waits. When you care for flower pots in winter with restraint instead of fear, you are not abandoning them. You are honoring their rhythm. You are allowing the garden to sleep. And when spring finally returns, you'll notice something remarkable. The pots you worried over the least are often the ones that come back the strongest. Winter settles deeper now. The light grows thinner, the days shorter, and the garden enters a kind of listening mode. The pots no longer ask for attention the way they did in summer. They don't wilt dramatically. They don't beg. They simply wait. And this is where many good-hearted gardeners make their quietest mistakes. Because waiting feels like neglect. On one of those gray afternoons when the air smells like snow even before it falls, you may find yourself standing over a pot, watering can in hand, wondering if the soil looks too dry. The instinct to help rises quickly. After all, caring has always meant doing something. But winter teaches a different kind of care. Water in cold months is not a gift. It is a responsibility. Roots that are resting do not drink the way growing roots do. They absorb slowly, cautiously, and only when conditions are safe. Pouring water into cold soil when temperatures are low is like offering a glass of ice water to someone trying to sleep. It shocks the system, settles where it shouldn't, and lingers far longer than intended. The wise gardener learns to water winter pots only on mild days, when the sun has lifted the chill and the soil can breathe again. Midday is best, not morning, not evening. And when you water, you do it slowly, patiently. Enough to moisten the soil, never enough to saturate it. Then you stop. You resist the urge to just add a little more. Winter roots don't need generosity. They need restraint. If there is one habit that saves more potted plants than any other, it is learning to walk away after watering, trusting that less is enough. As winter tightens its grip, another temptation appears, the urge to wrap everything. You see the frost on the rims of pots. You hear the forecast whispering about hard freezes. Suddenly, the garden feels vulnerable, and your hands reach for burlap, blankets, plastic, anything that looks like protection. This is where intention matters more than action. Covering a pot can be helpful, but only when done lightly and thoughtfully. Plants do not need to be sealed away from winter. They need airflow, dryness, and stable temperatures. Heavy plastic traps moisture. Tight wraps hold condensation against stems and soil. What was meant as protection quietly becomes a trap. The most effective covers breathe. Garden fleece, burlap, old cotton sheets used loosely, never tied tightly. These soften the cold without suffocating the plant beneath. And covers are not permanent clothing. They are temporary shelter, used during extreme cold and removed as soon as temperatures rise. A plant wrapped all winter cannot rest properly. It must feel the season just gently. There's a rhythm to winter care that mirrors aging itself. Knowing when to step in, knowing when to step back. Trusting that rest is not failure, but preparation. Snow begins to fall now, soft at first, then heavier. And here comes another quiet truth that surprises many gardeners the first time they learn it. Snow is not an enemy. In fact, a layer of snow can be one of the best insulators a pot will ever receive. It settles gently, blocking wind, moderating temperature swings, and protecting soil from deep freezes. The problem is not snow. The problem is ice. Ice forms when water has nowhere to go, when drainage fails, when pots sit flat and meltwater refreezes again and again. This is why all the earlier choices, elevation, drainage, shelter, matter so deeply now. A well-prepared pot welcomes snow and survives ice. As winter deepens, the garden grows quieter still. The pots no longer change from day to day. Weeks pass with no visible movement. This is the moment when many gardeners feel uneasy. Surely something should be happening. But nothing happening is exactly what should be happening. Below the soil line, roots are conserving energy. They are repairing tiny injuries. They are waiting for light to lengthen and warmth to return. Every interruption, too much water, too much warmth, too much fuss, pulls them out of rest and costs them strength. The final lesson of winter container care is the hardest to accept, especially for those who have spent a lifetime nurturing others. You do not need to save your plants every day. You need to prepare them once, and then trust them. Winter is not a season of growth. It is a season of endurance. And endurance is built through stability, not stimulation. When you pass your pots now, notice how still they are, how quietly they hold themselves. There is dignity in that stillness. Wisdom, too. The gardeners who lose the fewest plants are not the ones who worry the most. They are the ones who understand that survival is not loud. It is patient. It is slow. It is deliberate. And when spring finally arrives, not all at once, but gradually, with longer afternoons and softer mornings, you'll see it. The pots you left alone, the ones you trusted, they will be the first to stir. Winter will have tested them, and they will have passed. By late winter, the cold changes its tone. It no longer bites the way it did at the beginning. The air still carries frost, but the light lingers just a little longer in the afternoon. Snow melts more slowly. The garden exhales, almost imperceptibly, as if testing whether it is safe to breathe again. This is the moment that reveals everything. If winter was endured properly, the pots do not rush. They do not explode into growth. They pause, and then they respond. One morning, while passing your pots without intention, you notice it. Not a leaf, not yet, just a softening of the soil surface, a stem that looks less brittle, a hint of green that wasn't there the day before. It's subtle enough that many people miss it entirely, but those who practiced restraint all winter recognize it instantly. This is where the final lesson of winter container care lives. Resist the urge to celebrate too loudly. The worst mistake gardeners make at the end of winter is treating the first sign of life like a finish line. In truth, it is only a handshake. Roots are awake, but they are still fragile. Their strength was preserved by quiet months of rest, and now they need time to stretch without being pushed. You do not fertilize yet. You do not prune aggressively. You do not water deeply just because the sun feels warm. Instead, you observe. You let the pot warm gradually. You wait until nights stay above freezing before watering more regularly. When you do water, you keep it gentle. Enough to encourage roots outward, never enough to drown them. Fertilizer, if used at all, comes later, when growth is unmistakable and consistent. Winter has taught you patience. Spring rewards it. There is a moment, often unnoticed, when the pot fully returns to itself. The soil becomes responsive again. New leaves unfold slowly, sturdier than last year's. Stems hold themselves with quiet confidence. Not the frantic reach of a plant that barely survived, but the steady posture of one that rested well. This is when you understand the truth that stays with gardeners for a lifetime. Plants do not need constant saving. They need conditions that allow them to save themselves. The pots that endured winter best were not the ones wrapped, watered, and worried over endlessly. They were the ones given shelter, dryness, air, and then trust. Standing there now, with spring light warming your hands, you may realize something else has happened alongside the garden. You changed too. You learned to intervene less, to act earlier and gentler, to recognize that care is not measured by motion, but by timing. This is why winter gardening stays with people as they age. It mirrors a deeper wisdom, that strength grows in stillness, that rest is not weakness, and that survival is often quiet. When the pots bloom again, they won't announce what they endured. They will simply grow, and you'll know.